George Russell has just won his first race of the season, yet he's a driver without a seat for 2026 as it currently stands. George Russell could potentially not be on the grid next season. Now, that is absolutely crazy, in my personal opinion, to even think about. And you may be thinking, no, he'll definitely be at Mercedes, or maybe a straight swap with Max Verstappen in Red Bull, especially with the talent and the results he is showing this season. But stranger things have happened in F1. But I think it is absolutely crazy that George Russell could be without a seat for next year, and that Mercedes haven't signed him up to that contract yet. George Russell, at the moment, as we currently stand, with 10 races completed in this season, has only finished outside the top 5 twice. That is, once in Monaco, where we know it wasn't his fault, there was a mechanical issue in qualifying, which, as we know in the race, there's no overtaking, and he finished down in 11th. And then the second race, where he finished outside the top 5, was at Imola, which, yes, has by far been his worst race of the season. But he has 5 podium position finishes, the rest of them in the top 5, and of course, he has just got his first win of the season. Not too bad from, I think, is there another driver who's performing as highly as George Russell on the grid right now? I definitely think he is in the top 3 of the best drivers performing on the grid right now. The other two, probably Oscar Piastri and Max Verstappen. I think Max Verstappen, though, in the last few races has struggled a bit more, primarily due to the issues that we've seen in that Red Bull car, and of course his frustrations coming to boil there. But George has been very, very consistent in a Mercedes that has just been way off the pace this whole regulation set, and we knew that they were definitely not going to be the car to beat the McLarens and win many races this year. But George Russell has, been there. He's always been there, as the meme has been. George Russell does nothing and gets a podium, but that's what you need to do sometimes in F1, and George needs to put his car in those positions to reap those rewards. But this weekend at Canada, boy oh boy, I mean, we don't know how often that Mercedes is going to be in this position to be able to win races, but in the very few times that it is, and the same with, say, the Red Bull that Max gets so much praise for, when that car is in a window to win races, Max does it. And I think George Russell is also one of those drivers. Yes, George is definitely, I think, one of the highest performing drivers on the grid. And the fact that Toto Wolff is not signed George up for 2026 yet is mad. Now, we know that they've put a lot of stock in Kimi Antonelli, and I think that really comes through on the radio messages. Toto is very, very animated whenever Kimi does well in a race. And look, I really do highly rate Kimi, and I think he's got a great future ahead of him, and what a great result it was here this weekend, getting his first podium, purely on merit as well. But when you saw the qualifying, George got on pole position, and I don't think I've ever seen Toto Wolff so subdued. Very, very bizarre. Now, George, we know, is being more open about his contracts, and that he hasn't got a contract yet for 2026, which I think is quite clever. Clearly, maybe not all is well behind the scenes with those contract negotiations. Toto Wolff hasn't, I guess, helped himself as well in this scenario, because ultimately he has been open with his courting of Max Verstappen. Just look at how open he was when they announced Kimi Antonelli at Monza last year for this season. George was sitting alongside him, and he went, yeah, we're trying to get Max. I'm paraphrasing there, but he basically openly admitted it with George right alongside him. Now, yes, that puts, to an extent, puts pressure on George, and it's like, look, you either rise up to this pressure and this challenge and prove to me you want to be my #1 driver, or you don't. I get that. Tough loving is the approach of some management in any world, in any industry, particularly in sports. We have seen it before, and George has definitely risen up to that. So why has he still not signed that contract? What are they waiting for? Surely money isn't an issue. If they want to spend money on Max Verstappen, that is, surely money isn't an issue. I mean, you've pretty much just freed up the bank with Lewis Hamilton going out. That's freed up 50 million a year. So I'm sure George isn't asking for 50 million a year, and he's easily affordable. So what is holding up these contract talks? We know it is Max. I know it is. And it's the fact that Toto, or maybe the higher-ups, still want that. But I think things are not so rosy behind the scenes. George is doing what he needs to do out on track, though, primarily also to make himself look more attractive to other teams. Because let's say, yes, Max does come to Mercedes. I think Christian Horner would take George Russell. And I think, actually, that would be quite a good pairing. Also, George is no doubt going to be doing his due diligence, his management team, going to be talking to teams up and down the grid to see if he can, see if they'd be interested. There's been links to him to Audi recently, Aston Martin as well. And look, every driver needs to ensure their own future first rather than the teams. They need to look after themselves first. And that is no doubt what George Russell's teams will be doing. But is Toto maybe got wind of this and is taking a bit of heart to George, speaking maybe to other teams to ensure his future? But then Toto Wolff maybe wants his cake and to eat it too, because he doesn't want George speaking to other teams, but then he's also caught in Max Verstappen in his camp. I don't know. Something is just very off. That's what it seems from me this weekend. Now, Toto Wolff was a bit more animated when it came to the race win for George Russell, and he did come over the radio and tell what a great drive it was to George. But you never really know. Was it his delight of Mercedes getting the win, or was it his delight of Kimi Antonelli getting on the podium? Yeah, very, very bizarre at the moment. I think George Russell has definitely shown that he deserves to be on the grid. He is definitely one of the top drivers on the grid at this moment in time. And I think, like a few other drivers on the grid, there's only a select few, I do think he is a driver that if he was given a championship winning car, I think he would be in a very close championship battle. I think if you put George Russell in that second McLaren alongside Oscar Piastri, I think we'd see a very different championship fight right now. So yeah, very excited to see what George Russell's future has in store for him. Hopefully it's at Mercedes, because I don't know, I think they just suit, to be honest with you, and who knows who's going to be the quickest team in 26. You're best suited probably to stay at Mercedes, but no doubt if Max gets any wind of that, he'll be looking for a move, I think, as well, with maybe Red Bull's less than harmonious team at the moment, if the rumours are to be believed. But what do you think? Do you think George should re-sign for Mercedes? Do you, at bare minimum, think he should be on the grid for 2026? I think it's mad. And clearly George is getting it out in the media now that he hasn't got a contract signed for 2026. These subtle hints, it is like, come on, Toto. Like, come on. Let's sign on the dotted line. No doubt George is ready to do so, but Toto is still just waiting to see what Max does, which is ridiculous in my personal opinion, with the way that George is performing this season.